What's up guys, welcome to new Unreal Engine 5 tutorial, and today I'm gonna show you all about blueprints if you are a beginner and you don't know anything about them. It's gonna be a very easy video to follow, so let's get started. But first, check out the link in the description to get awesome Unreal Engine courses on Winfox. Alright, so the first thing that we want to do is go ahead and open the Unreal Engine editor, so you can go ahead and create a new project. In my case, I'm going to be using the new version of Unreal Engine 5.1, but of course you can use whatever Unreal Engine 5 version that you want. So what we want to do is go ahead and select the third person template, as it is just what we need to learn from it and all the blueprints that it has and everything like that. So let's go ahead and select a project location that you want to go ahead and create the project on, and then we're going to set a project name. In my case, I'm going to say like blueprint beginner. Okay, but of course you can name it like you want. Now it's very important, well, it's not really important, but make sure that it is just selected in blueprint, and yeah, that's pretty much all the thing that you have to make sure. Select blueprint and that's it. If you select C++, it will also include blueprints, but it's just better if you include directly blueprints. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and click create, and now we're gonna go ahead and just wait until it opens. Alright, so now you can see that the project has opened, and we have the viewport, the outliner, the content browser, etc. Now, I do have to say that I have a tutorial on how to create your first game, very small game of course, but how to create your first game in Unreal Engine for beginners. So if you want to check that out after seeing this video, I will go ahead and leave it in the description, and I will in there I basically cover more about like the viewport and etc. about the editor, but this video is gonna center on the blueprints itself, like the visual graph noding, etc. Okay, so first of all, let's check out a blueprint and let's explain what it actually is. So for example, we can go into a very simple blueprint. This is gonna be the third person blueprints, and we can see that we have here the third person character blueprint. Okay, so now we can see that it is a blueprint class. So what this is it is like it was a prefab. Okay, so here we will contain all about our player character, from the visual nodes that we can go ahead and interpret all of the logic and stuff, which is probably what you know as blueprints. And then we have all the components and the character model itself with its animations and stuff. Okay, I mean the animations are done in a separate blueprint that I also have a tutorial on, so if you want I can also link it in the description below, but you get the idea. Okay, we have the nodes itself, and then we have like the character and the collisions, etc. Let's go ahead and open this up so you can kind of see how it works. So it will go ahead and open into a new window. We're gonna go ahead and just anchor it here into a new tab. Okay, so let's go ahead and check out this. So we have a lot of things over here and you're probably a bit overwhelmed, but let's go ahead and narrow it down. So first of all, let's start with the viewport itself. Okay, we're gonna go from left to right over here. So you will see that we have the viewport, which is very similar to, of course, the scene viewport, but in this case it's just previewing the blueprint itself. Okay, so in our case this is the blueprint for the third person character. So here we have, like I mentioned before, the model for the character, the capsule collision for it, and then things like the camera and stuff. So in here we have the component section. In this is basically we have, well, like I just mentioned before, the mesh for the camera, for the character, sorry, the capsule component, the camera itself, the camera boom, which is basically just where the camera will anchor and rotate itself. And we can add so many things, as for example, you can see here we can just, for example, add a cube. If we were to add that, we can also use, for example, duplicate this mesh with Ctrl D, and then we will go ahead and get another player, etc. So in here is basically where you can add all of your things into your blueprint. Okay, for example, you can also add like lighting and stuff, for example a point light, and you can see that we have light over here. So it's basically where you can add all your things. Now we can also add another type of components, which includes some logic. For example, in here we have the character movement component, which includes you know, some max speed variables, some gravity, etc. Okay, which is already added for the third person character, but you can also add other ones, as for example point sensing. In the future if you're gonna make AI and etc. and so on. So of course I'm just gonna cover the basics over here, but you get the idea. Okay, so let's go ahead and I will cover, well, yeah, I'll go ahead and cover this too. So if you select any component, you will see the details panel over here. Now, I'm gonna make a note over here, and if you, for some reason, which is very weird, but for some reason you don't see any of these tabs, you can just go into window and then you will access, you're gonna have open them, all of them, okay? So the details panel will go ahead and display all of the properties that they are for the component or the variable or whatever that you are selecting on this blueprint. So in our case, in the mesh, you can see that we can change the asset itself. So for example, I can change it into be this orange guy. You know, you can basically change the materials, you can change the name class, which is basically what I explained before for the animations and stuff. You can change, for example, it will simulate physics, so we'll have like physics and will fall, if it can cast shadows, etc. All the properties about what we have selected in the blueprint, okay? The location, etc. Okay, so now we have kind of covered a bit those. We're gonna go into this graphs over here. So first of all, we have the construction script. Now we are not gonna cover this because it is something that probably you're not gonna touch in the start really, and basically I will explain it in a second because you will understand it better when I actually explain the event graph. So the event graph is the place that are gonna actually place all the visual nodes itself, okay? This is where you're gonna place all of the logic, okay? Now the difference between this and the event graph is that the event graph will begin executing when you press play. When you press play, it will start, you know, if it begin play, will do all this. When you, I don't know, press the jump key, it will do all this, etc. But the construction script, it will do everything also while we are not playing the game and we are just in the editor, okay? So this is the main difference. That's why you're gonna be using more the event graph at the start, because you don't really need to do anything on the editor itself for now. When you're in more simple level, again, beginner level, whatever, but the event graph is really what you're gonna start touching as we execute the game, which is probably what you want. Okay, so let me cover one more thing first before we enter into the event graph itself and the nodes and we start doing some things. So we have one more thing, which is here the functions, graphs, and variables section. So first of all, on the bottom here, you can see that we have a list of all the variables that we have. In that case, we have two variables which are actually referencing our components. So sometimes when you add a component, it will create a kind of variable so you can access it. Anyway, don't worry about that, about the variables linked into components. But if I were to add a new variable, you will see that we can, you know, put the name of the variable and then the type. Like if it was normal code, you know, if it was a boolean, a float, an integer, etc. Now we'll play with them in just a few seconds when we actually start doing things, but you get to know where they are and how you can add them and delete them, etc. So then we have the event graph section. So you can see that this is just a kind of shortcut into different nodes that you may have. For example, the begin play, you can just double click and you will go directly. For example, the jump node, you can just go directly here. It's basically just like a shortcut. But then we have the functions, which comes into a separate event graph. So if I were to create a new function, you will see that it opened a new tab and we have a new event graph with a new space, etc. So this is just to make things a bit more organized. So if you're gonna make a big chunk of code and nodes and stuff, instead of having all in this enormous event graph, you can just narrow it down into different sections by creating functions. So we can put all the code here and then you can go ahead and call the new function that we have just created from here and when you play the game, etc. So it's a bit more organized in that sense, but we're not gonna be using that right now, but you get the idea. Okay, so now that we have kind of covered a bit the basics of a blueprint itself and stuff, let's start actually getting to know a bit the nodes and how they work and etc. So like you may know, of course, they go from left to right. So when they're plugged in, you can see this arrow pointing with that, where they will go. So the nodes will have some properties. First of all, the ones that are on the left over here is basically there are inputs. So for example, this is just casting to the player controller. So this is accessing the player controller, okay? So this requires an input. It is what player controller we want to go ahead, which is the object. So in our case, we are saying that, well, it is the controller itself so we're plugging that into an input. Now it might make not a lot of sense. Now when we start experimenting, we'll start to make more sense, but you can see kind of how it works. In the left side we'll have the inputs, and in the right side you can see that we have the outputs. So here this will give us the player controller itself, and now we're accessing to the inputs and adding the mapping, etc. So not all nodes will have, for example, an input and an output. It's just depending on what their task is and what their logic itself is. Okay, so for example, if we go into a simple thing over here, we can say that we have a simple input action. So this is basically when we press the spacebar. Okay, so when we press the spacebar, when it's triggered, we'll go ahead and call the jump node. So the character will go ahead and jump. But when we stop pressing the spacebar, which is basically uncompleted, it will stop jumping. So you can see how it kind of works and how it organizes and stuff. Now we can get into more complex stuff when we can organize them into little like knobs, so it's a bit more organized, etc. Now we will not go into so much more detail, but you can see how you can start breaking them down, plugging the input over here, which will contain an output, etc. So let's make something very simple right now, and it's just we're gonna use a variable to kind of print something in the screen, and we can get to know a bit more variables and how we'll go ahead and display them, etc. So let's go ahead and create a new variable, which is gonna be, for example, my number. So my number is gonna be a integer because it's gonna be just a whole normal number, and then we can compile, and you will see in the details panel, if we select it, we can actually assign a value. Of course, in the future you can create variables, for example with your health, and you can put like which health it has, etc. But this is just an example. So for example, we can say 5. So now what we can do is just drag this variable into the event graph, and you will see that we have two options. We can get it or set it. If I were to get it, it just will give me the output itself. So I will basically be accessing, well, what value it has right now. So if I were to get this, this will contain the number 5. But if I were to drag it and then set it, I can basically override it and change the number. So now if I were to press a 2 over here and I were to connect this will change from a 5 into a 2 whenever it gets into this part of the event graph. Okay, so you kind of know how it now works. Now let's go ahead and just do something simple. We're gonna print it on the screen. So if I were to get the number here and get it, so we want to access whatever is right now over here, and then I drag this and I say print. Sorry, we have to drag from here, print. You can see that we have a print string over here. Okay, so the reasons that we cannot directly type here print is that this is a integer and this is a string. So what Unreal Engine is very good at is just dragging it, and then we can go ahead and see that it already created a node to convert the number into a string, so we can have it displayed on the screen. So Unreal Engine is very good at it. So the reason that didn't appear is because we have context sensitive, and it's just it will just display things that are that make sense what you're gonna basically plug in. Okay, anyway, so this will just print into the string whatever value my number has. So now we can compile and save it. So compile is just making sure that everything is okay, and then etc. Okay, like if it was normal code. And then if I press play, you will see down here we can see that it has number 5 appeared. Now it was very quick. We can go ahead and just expand the settings over here, and then we can just go ahead and put the duration to be like 10 seconds. Okay, so we can of course also change a lot of different parameters in between nodes. So now you will see some more time, you can see number 5, and if I were to stop here and then change it into 10, of course now it will go ahead and print the number 10, which is great. But if I were to go ahead and just before go ahead and set it, and for example into 0, you will see that now of course, well, it will print 0 because right before we print it, we're changing this variable into b0. But if I were to do it the other way around, and it's first printed but then go ahead and set it to 0, you will see that now it will print 10 because, well, we're printing it and access the value before we actually change it. So you can see how the workflow kind of works over here. Now, just to make to be clear over here, this is printing right when we press play because we are going ahead and going through the begin play. So this event will just launch as soon as we press play, it will do all this, which is just setting the input and stuff. Don't worry about that, you don't have to know that right now. But then after that, we're just doing our thing, which is just printing our number. Now we can do one more thing, and it's, for example, make a boolean. For example, yeah, my boolean. Okay, I'm choosing very boring names over here, but it's just to make some example. So if I were to just create a boolean, which is, like, you know, a true or false, and then drag it, and then if I were to get it, we can use this really handy node, which is a branch. And this is just like an if statement. So if it's true, it will go through here, and if this boolean is false, it will go through here. So for example, we can just say that if this boolean is true, we will print, well, true. But if this boolean is false, we can just copy and paste this, and then this will basically say, well, false. So right now, this boolean we selected, you can see that is false. So when I press play, you will see that it will print, well, false, because of course this is false and it's going through false. But if I were to change this into be true and then compile, and then if I press play, you will see that now it appears true. So this is just a neat way of just making if statements. You can also see how, depending on the variables value and stuff, it will go through one node or each other. So this is just how you will start making a simple workflow and systems and etc. with the logic itself, and you don't really need to know how to code in a normal script. You know, this is just very handy nodes that will make you a lot of the process and stuff. Okay, so let's make a very simple example with actual functionality for gameplay. So let me go ahead and delete these two variables over here. So what we're going to do is that when we press a key, it will turn on a flashlight. Now we're not gonna have any model or whatsoever. It's just gonna be as simple as just activating the light, okay? From the player's head, it will just activate a simple light, which will be a flashlight. And then when we press the key again, it will disable it. So, now I want you to kind of think about how we will do this. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a few seconds, and we'll go ahead and start making it ourselves. All right, I know that was really quick to kind of think, but okay, let's get started. If you want, you can just pause the video. But the first thing I want to do is go ahead and add the key input itself. Now you can see that it will be a bit different about this. The reason is that, well, let's go ahead and first add the key. So if we right click, I haven't mentioned this, I think, but you can just add whatever node you want, okay? For example, print, I can just access, well, the print string node. You can just right click and add whatever node you want. And also you can just drag from any node itself, and then also print whatever, access any node that you want. So you can right click or just drag from other things, okay? As well as also from outputs and inputs too. Okay, so now if we were to type key and scroll a bit down, you will see that we have a keyboard events with all the keys that we want. And for example, let's make that when we press the E key, we will do our flashlight thing. Now you can see this a bit different between this input and this input. The reason is that this is using an enhanced input system, which is being added at the start, etc. Now this is a bit more advanced, so that's why you really don't know how. You don't need to know that right now, but this is just a better way of just making inputs, so then later on you can have them from a single collection, and then access is triggered, completed if it's going with different modifiers, etc. Now you don't need to know that, so we're gonna make it as simple as just going ahead and typing here. We can access different keys, and for example the E key. So when we press the E key, we'll do something and then release, etc. Now we do have a very handy note to make sure that when we press it once, it will go ahead and enable, and then when we press it again, it will go ahead and disable. So we can just go from press and then access the flip-flop node, which is exactly what we want. So when we press it one time, it will go ahead and go through A, so in our case enable the flashlight, and then we will press it again, we'll go through B and then disable the flashlight. Now if you want, you can change this and make it so that you can hold the E key to enable the flashlight and disable. So how you will go is that like very similar to the flip-flop, but when you press it, you'll go ahead and enable the flashlight, and then when you release it, you will disable the flashlight. So then you will need to hold instead of just clicking once. And in my case, I'm gonna make it so you can click it once, but of course you can change it up and into your customization and stuff. So just so you know how to basically how things work and stuff. Okay. Anyway, so now we have to basically enable our flashlight, but how do we do that? Well, like you may have guessed, we have to add a component over here. In our case, it will be a light component. So we can just go up here into add and search for a light. Now in my case, there are a lot of different lighting options. In our case, we just want the spotlight, which is the most similar thing to a flashlight. Okay, just applying a light into a certain direction. Okay, so I'm gonna change the name into flashlight. Okay, we go flashlight, yeah, like this. Okay, great. So now we have a flashlight. Now you can see that we really cannot see the light. This is because on the viewport there's not really an environment to lit up, so we kind of have just to, you know, manage ourselves. But the later in the game you will see that we can actually do so. But anyway, so I'm gonna kind of just put it in front of the player's face and stuff. Okay, there's not gonna be any model itself, any animation of turning on. This is a simple logic as just enabling and disabling the light. Okay, so we can just place the light over here, and then if we want, we can just turn up a bit of the intensity. So for example 7,000, and then we can just compile. Now by default, if I press play, you'll see that we have the light. You can see that we have the light, but we haven't pressed E or whatever. Okay, of course, first of all, we haven't applied any logic in E whatsoever. If now, right now, if I press E, nothing will happen, because I mean, it will not do anything. We just have the flip-flop, which is, you know, just controlling A and B. Okay, it's not actually doing something. But the thing is that we have the flashlight enabled by default. So that's why when I press play, it's enabled. So what we have to do is go ahead and go into details and then say visible. And then you can see that we can disable visible. So we can see that now if I press play, now the lighting is not appearing. So this is exactly what we have to do, but from our code, from our visual nodes. So in our case, we're gonna leave it as this. So by default in the start, it will be disabled. So we want to leave our component disabled. But now in the event graph, we can just drag our flashlight. Okay. Now we're gonna go ahead and get it, and now you can see that we'll get an output node, so we can do things with this flashlight. In our case, we can just get a node which is set visibility, which is exactly what we want. So you can just go ahead, plug it into A, and then the new visibility will be true. So now it will basically turn the flashlight on. And then what we want to do is do the opposite in B. So we can go ahead and get again a flashlight, and then set visibility, but leave this as false. And then we can just plug this in and then put this flashlight over here. So now if I were to compile and save, if I press play, you'll see that now, well, our flashlight is not enabled or whatsoever. But if I press E, now we have our flashlight, and we can go ahead and move around. And then if I were to press E again, now our flashlight is disabled. So now you can see that this is very simple, and I mean, we have just like 4 nodes over here. This is very easy to make blueprints. Okay, you don't have to code or know any, you know, coding programming itself. You can just go ahead and have logic itself and just apply them. Okay, and I'm just saying that nodes, the name of the nodes will kind of make sense and be accordingly to what they do. So in my case, set visibility will do what it is, you know, set it visible or invisible, so etc. So I think to make it more organized, well, you can just select everything and then just press C, and we can add a comment. So what we can do is say, well, flashlight, set flashlight on and then off. So like this is just, you can basically have your code a bit more organized by putting kind of comments and stuff, etc. So yeah, we have a very simple example of just going ahead and turning a flashlight on and off, as you can see. So this is really cool. Now the thing that we can do is go ahead and go into flashlight, and we can just go ahead and drag it inside the mesh. So what this will do is basically make it a child of mesh and make mesh a parent of flashlight. It's gonna be like inside, it's gonna be like his child, okay? It's gonna be like inside. Now we have a new option, which is parent socket. So now we can just go ahead and drag in here, and we can search all of the bones that this character model has on the skeleton. So what I want to do is attach it into the head. So we can just search for head, and you see that now it will start like moving our coin into the head. Now it's off of the position. This is because we have to reset the location. So just press this value in here and it will go back into here. So now you see that it's perfectly attached into the head. It will be following the rotation, the position, etc. It's basically right now inside of the head. So I think I'm going to do is just put a bit forward, and then we can change the here into 5. So the snapping will be a bit different. So now we can just drag it a bit more. There we go. And then put it back to 10. And then what this will do is simple as just be following the bone. So basically the head. So now if I press play, it will be a bit more realistic. I press E, and you will see, I mean, it's hard to appreciate, but it will kind of follow the head's movement, and you can see with a lot of attention. So it's a bit more realistic in this case, you know what I mean? And now what you can do is get this concept and put it more into the expertise mode. So for example, add a model. So you will go ahead and add a static mesh over here, add a static mesh, and then this will be, for example, the flashlight model, you know. And then in the static mesh you will add your flashlight model. So for example, I can just add a cube. Now you can be very creative with these things and just add a cube and just like make it small. I'm gonna also disable the snapping, so I have a bit more of a freedom. Actually, this snapping, yeah, for the scale. All right. You can also change between different tools if you press WER, okay, between them. And anyway, so we can just go ahead and stretch it and make it smaller, right? And then this will just basically create a very simple flashlight over here. So now what we can do is go ahead and parent it into the right hand. So hand R, and you will see that now we can reset the location. And now we can go ahead and rotate this guy over here, and we can kind of place it in the hand, as you can see. And now of course this model is rubbish. Okay, it's not an actual flashlight, but you can see how it will kind of work. Now it's like holding a flashlight, and then what you can do is just move this flashlight to be, well, also a child of flashlight model itself. And then you can just reset the rotation and then plug it over here. And now it will be following this model, and the flashlight will come out from there, as you can see. So now if I press play, we have the like the cube selected, which is like the flashlight model. You will replace that, and then if I press E, the flashlight will come from that model itself, as you can see. Now the rotation is a bit not exactly good, I think, but you get the idea of how it would basically go ahead and work. You know what I mean? And just how you manage components to make them child of each other, to arrange them and make the thing that you want. And then with the event graph, you can just go ahead and enable a flashlight or disable, etc. Now let's go ahead and narrow it a bit down. So let's go ahead and create an event. Now, like I mentioned before, we have functions and events. I didn't mention events, but I did mention functions. So an event is exactly the same as a function, but it will be in the same event graph. So to add an event, what you can use is right click, go to custom event, and this will be, for example, turn flashlight. Okay, so now what I can do is replace this and then do all of this from here. So the E key will not do anything, but turn flashlight will do everything. So now what I can do is make it more organized. So when I press E, it's gonna be very, cleaner. So I can just say, well, turn flashlight and call my event. And you can see now there's only 2 nodes, but the rest of the logic is already happening here. So you're gonna make things multiple times from different points in your graph. Instead of doing it every time and copying and pasting, you can just arrange them into an event and then call them later on what you want to go ahead and call them, and this will do exactly the same. Now you can do the same thing, but actually from a function to have its own graph. So you can just right click over here, left click to add a new function, then again turn there you go, flashlight. Oh, I had the same. Okay, turn flash, turn flash. Okay, so you can see that, well, turn flash. Okay, anyway, the name doesn't really matter in this case. Now you can see that we have exactly the same, but with its own graph. So we can just go ahead, Ctrl X to cut it, and then paste it over here, plug it over here, and then compile. And now you will see that if I press E, I can just get the turn flash, or directly drag it from here. You can choose, and then this will do exactly the same, but it's way more organized because we just have 2 nodes on our main event graph. Literally 2 nodes, but the rest of the code is happening in this function, which is here. So it would just make it in another tab, so you can go ahead and have things a bit more organized, and you can see it will do exactly the same. So you can see now how you could, you know, play with functions, events, and things to make it more organized and just structure the code a bit better. Now you probably don't want to make a whole function or event just for this silly 4 nodes over here, you know. Like, you probably want to make functions or events for bigger things, or for things that you're gonna reuse a lot. For example, if you want to go ahead and enable the flashlight not only when you press E, but when you, for example, jump or move, or when the game starts, then you can use an event to trigger them from different points without doing that. But if it's something very small, you know, I don't really recommend making a lot of events and functions, because then if you have a lot of them, it will be a mess too, you know what I mean? So you have to kind of see if the systems I'm gonna make requires an advanced functions or whatever, you know, but you can see how it will work. So you guys, I will be leaving this tutorial over here. If you enjoyed it and found it helpful, I would really appreciate if you could like the video and subscribe to my channel. I have lots of Unreal Engine 5 tutorials like this one, so if you want to check it out, go ahead. And now, yes, with all that said, well, bye bye.